The biggest game of the college football season could be played this upcoming weekend when the Georgia Bulldogs get set to host the Alabama Crimson Tide. And joining me to talk that and a lot more is former Georgia All-American, 5-6-year NFL veteran, and now a college football analyst over at ESPN. It's a former Georgia All-American, Matt Stinchcomb. Matt, what's going on, man? How are you today?
I'm doing great, man. Excited for this weekend's games.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a lot of fun this could be an underrated week 5 in college football. It's already been a crazy season so far in the sport of college football. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Starting with offensive line play in the SEC. It seems to me that it's been a bit underwhelming. Just knowing what the preseason expectations for a lot of offensive lines like LSU, like Georgia, like Texas, a lot of different offensive lines that you've seen, they've struggled when it comes to run blocking as well as some in pass pro. Why do you think this is right now going on in the SEC?
Well, I don't know that in general it's down in those specific areas. I have seen moments where, of course, it could be a good bit better. And I don't really know what some of the expectations were, especially in the preseason when it comes to offensive line play. I put that right up there with, passing game and what people expect out of that element for teams. A lot of folks were high on Auburn's passing game coming into the season. I would think that they are less than thrilled with the outcome so far with that prediction. The line play in general, I think part of it's a function of, in this conference, you're facing among some of the best defensive line personnel that you're going to see in all of college football. And then the other piece is with the advent of tempo offenses, you have to allocate more spots, roster spots, scholarships, recruiting efforts to skill position players, space players. You have more defensive back type bodies on the field. Therefore, you need more defensive backs. If you're going to run a tempo offense and you're going to have any passing threat whatsoever, you're going to have more wide receivers. And so you can't throw as many numbers at the offensive line position. So if you miss at the same rate that you missed before, but on fewer numbers of players, then the likelihood of having a collection of guys that you would want to win with or could win with is lower. It's a numbers game. And I do think that is part of it. That coinciding with, in a tempo offense, you don't have the same 5 guys. They tend to rotate, shuffle guys through, and there's not a group of positions that have to play in concert with one another more than offensive linemen. So I think there's a number of external factors that play against really good offensive line play. I would say it's been trending downward for some time now.
And is that just because of the level of competition that you see up on the front 4, or is it something to go along with the evolution of the offense that you see?
Yeah, I think it's all those things. The competition is better from a defensive front standpoint. It's obviously not exclusive to the SEC. There are really good players in these other conferences. But from a concentration of talent and skill, there's just not another place where there's as many big bodies that can move as fast as they move in this league. And because of that, makes it that much more challenging.
Matt, let's go ahead and get into the big game of the weekend for arguably the month of September, maybe even the college football season as of now, Georgia and Alabama. When you look at this game so far, it's going to be a battle of whose offensive line is going to be much better. Is it going to be Georgia's being able to protect Carson Beck's despite losing a lot of key starters from the last 2 years, a still young and very experienced Alabama front 4, and against Alabama's injury-prone offensive line, but should be back healthy for this upcoming weekend? What other key factors do you see being a key to victory for both teams?
Tackling. I think that might be among the biggest in this game for Georgia defensively. And runs in this Alabama offense, if chalk holds, based on what we've seen through 3 games under Kalen Milroe, was scrambling for yards more so than he was the intentional ball carrier. That's different this year so far through 3 games. Not an easy guy to get on the ground. One of the more explosive players. Tackling would be a big piece of it, and then explosive plays. Alabama's been able to generate those. Georgia hasn't. They have struggled, especially having already got the one conference play game under their belt. Now, we can make arguments about the way Alabama played versus South Florida, but I do think that those are key elements in this game. From Georgia's defensive perspective, is you have to tackle well and match some of the explosive playmaking, because I don't think that you are going to be able to stop it, but can you match it on your offensive side of the ball? There's quite a bit for Georgia to clean up from their last time out, whereas Alabama was able to get a game under their belt, albeit out of conference, versus a Wisconsin team that does not look to be very good defensively. Regardless, it was a really efficient performance for them on the offensive side of the ball.
Do you think Jalen Milroe's performance last week vaulted him up the Heisman rankings? I know that there were a couple of online betting sites that had him either in the top 3 or some even number 1 in the Heisman rankings right now.
Man, I don't know. I mean, ask the guy that bags your groceries at Publix. He could probably tell you. He's probably got a Heisman vote. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to that trophy. The way they arrive at the ultimate winner, I find to be concerning, illegitimate even.
So yeah, it's so you basically saying that it's just a bunch of opinionated voters that really don't know a lot about what they're seeing on the field compared to other individuals that put up almost those same numbers. And it also kind of depends on the type of system and the way that your program is kind of run. I think it's how you determine a Heisman Trophy winner.
I'm saying that there's too many votes out there. It's a diluted decision-making process. And then even, 2 years ago when they confined it to just the top 4, and it's I've thoroughly lost interest in the trophy.
Ooh. So when you look at these 2 head coaches, when you look at Kirby Smart and we'll look at Kalen DeBoer, do you think that Smart is under a lot of pressure going into this game? Do you think that this is his most anticipated game that he's had so far in the 2020s in the regular season?
Most anticipated? Probably not. I would like to think that there were others. You could point to a couple of Tennessee matchups when Tennessee was highly ranked and high flying at that point. But certainly, I think this might be the first time I think that Alabama has opened conference play versus a top 10 opponent ever, from Alabama's perspective. But it certainly is a tone setter, because I think the anticipation for a long time has been that a changing of the guard of sorts is underway, and perhaps even complete, when Coach Saban chose to retire, and there would be a de facto passing of the torch to Kirby. But if in fact you continue to struggle versus that same program, the sentiment or thought that the difficulty was with a coach and his abilities versus a program, that kind of transitions to, it's an Alabama problem. So there might be, I do think that there's an element to that that makes it kind of interesting. I don't think that Kirby perceives it that way. And it's certainly not the biggest game that he's coached. But so far this regular season, I don't think there's any doubt that this is the biggest one that will have been played all season in any conference by any team.
Matt Stinchcomb, ESPN college football analyst, joining us here on SEC Unfiltered. Want to give a shout out to our good friends over at GameTime. Download the GameTime app and use code SECU for $20 off of your first purchase. GameTime is one of the easiest and fastest ways to get tickets online. They're one of the fastest growing chains as well. Looking at some of the tickets on the GameTime app for this one, sold out event, but it looks like there's still a couple tickets going on. Just depends on who's wanting to sell their tickets. But as of right now, the cheapest when you look at it is about $258. So I'd save yourself under $300. You might save yourself a couple 20. Just use that code SECU. Matt, when you look at the implications of this game and you know Donald Trump comes to this game, remember the last time that a president even came to a college football game was 2019, and that was LSU and Alabama. And we know how that game went as one of the greatest of all time. Do you think that when you look at this game, does it affect the TV ratings? Does it affect the amount of people that you see like actually at the game just before?
Because President Trump might be there? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I don't know that there could be more attention paid to a college football game than the amount of attention that this one's going to garner. If there were a way to do that, I suppose a former president and current candidate showing up might bolster it some, but that's like, it's 96 degrees versus 94 degrees. Who cares? It's hot. It's going to be crowded. People are going to be really wound tight about this one. So if he comes, it's a point of interest, I suppose, but I don't know that it's going to be a markedly different environment because of it. I think this thing's going to be pretty electric regardless.
Let's talk about the skill set against the defensive backs of Georgia. Obviously, the youth that Alabama has with guys like Ryan Williams and company going up against a secondary with an All-American and an All-American defensive backfield for Georgia. Talk to me about that matchup and how that'll affect the outcome of the game.
Well, the explosive playmaking ability that Alabama has in general, and that whole passing battery, the quarterback and receiver position, is one that's going to get everybody's attention for sure. An element to consider in this game is the health of Georgia's defensive front, which doesn't tend to make obvious direct sense other than if you can affect a passer and or control the run game with your front four, front seven, we'll say, although typically it's front six, it's liberating from a coverage standpoint. And the last time out, Georgia was without a Jordan Hall, a Michael Williams, a Warren Brinson. Those are not insignificant absences. So that can have an impact and likely will have an impact on how Georgia deploys defensively. Ryan Williams is a phenom. It's unbelievable what he's doing so far as a 17-year-old kid. Hard to wrap your head around that. Has elite speed, game-changing type speed, which is of interest in this game because of the explosive playmaking ability. And Jalen Milroe's skill set and being able to extend plays stresses any secondary, much less one with a weapon like Williams. So I do think that Georgia's availability report along their front seven is probably more material than even what we've seen from a defensive back matchup and defensive back personnel standpoint, because you can throw more bodies into that secondary and in your coverage if, in fact, you've got guys that can help you control the box without having to borrow from that coverage. And it'll be interesting to see when Wednesday rolls around who projects to play and who doesn't.
Matt, last question for you before we let you go, brother. If you're a young offensive or just a young lineman in general, what is one key matchup that you want to see, whether it be O-line or D-line, that you want to kids or whoever to watch out for and look at their technique and try to mimic as well?
In this game specifically?
Yes.
Are you talking about in?
Just on the front four, because when you look at what Alabama has with their offensive.
Yeah, I don't know that there are in this game. I don't know that I would point to any of them that I would be like, wow, this guy's a real technician. Bodies, you watch this game and the takeaway is going to be, I need to grow to be about 6'5", minimum 340 pounds. But these two fronts, you got some big bodies that they throw at it. I don't know that there's a guy that I would say this guy right here is a technician. I don't know that it's that is their points of distinction. There are a couple of really good maulers in this game, but you gotta come out of a box a certain way to be able to pull that off versus some of the bodies that they see. I do think it'll be a lot of fun to watch the line of scrimmage, but if you're a guy that plays offensive line, I don't know that there's one that I would say, hey, watch him, see how he does it, because some of these guys get away with things, and I'm not saying it's wrong. If you can do it that way, great. But they can do it that way because of anatomy more than it is anything else. And that's just one thing you can't really control.
Well, I'll give my take on this since I'm a defensive lineman. And when I look at Georgia's D-line, not just when it comes to the big boys up front, I look at the outside backers. When I look at Michael Williams, when I look at Jalen Walker, what they bring, especially with an edge rusher, you bring speed. You bring a lot of speed to power, especially when an offensive lineman is just going to give you his chest. It gives you an opportunity to get a long arm in, and then when they try to anchor down, you kind of swim over. Or if they continue to get in their hair drop, you got to get a rip. Those two guys for me, especially on Georgia's edge, that's what's going to make a difference, especially in this game and being able to put pressure on Jalen Milroe. You got to get those two guys' motors rolling, and you have to get them on a consistent basis. Matt Stinchcomb, ESPN college football analyst, joining us on SEC Unfiltered. Matt, we appreciate your time. Where can we find you on social media, and where can we find you on the television, brother?
Every Tuesday night on SEC Network, and Saturdays on some SEC game somewhere on your television tier. Tuesday nights, SEC Network, and then usually that noon kick on Saturdays, unless we've got one of these bonus bye weekend seasons like we've got this year.
Matt, we appreciate your time here, brother. Hope you have a great rest of the week and enjoy the week off.
Good deal. Thanks so much for having me.